Hello, chess fans. It's Tuesday, November 15th. This is Sean from the E5 Outpost, a segment for adult improvers who want to keep aware of some of the latest ideas and events in the chess world. Today, we've got a couple stories. First up, the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour finals began yesterday. We'll take a look at how players have been faring, and we'll take a quick look as well at one of the games that were played yesterday. After that, we'll talk about Tani Adewumi, who just over the weekend achieved his third IM norm. We'll take a look at his final game from the Fall New York event that granted him this third norm, and we'll also talk about the rest of what he needs to do to achieve this IM title. First up, we'll go ahead and talk about the Meltwater finals. On the screen, you'll see briefly the scores after yesterday. As you can see, Magnus, Duda, and Mamedyarov are all leading the field after having won their matches yesterday cleanly. Anish Giri is in fourth after defeating Liam Lei in tiebreaks. So the game we'll go ahead and look over today is one of the games between Praggnanandhaa and Mamedyarov. This was sort of an interesting opening. This is kind of a Maroczy position where Black has ditched this dark squared bishop, which is often a problem in these structures. White has ditched this knight, which alleviates the space problem slightly, and so plans ended up being a little bit different for this game. Actually, both sides exchanged queens rather early, and we got sort of this already an endgame-ish sort of structure. Pragg played f4 with the idea of repairing his pawn structure here. Mamedyarov took and then played h5. The idea was that he wanted to trade this pawn for this pawn. Wing pawn maybe he thought was less valuable than the center pawn. Then maybe at some point in the future, Black wants to play f5 and sort of freeze these queenside pawns here. In addition, Mamedyarov sees that he has these queenside majority, and if this d pawn is off the board, it's actually a lot easier to play a move like c4 in the future. Pragg did not go for this exchange and instead played king f2, which was a great move in this position. In endgame positions, your king often wants to be more centralized, either wants to defend weaknesses that are difficult for other pieces to defend, or your king also wants to get in an attack at some point. Here the king is going to play a defensive role for d3 at some point. In addition, king f2 is also useful because you've now opened up the h-file. You've opened up a path for the rooks to access the h-file, where the rooks can now attack this weakness which just appeared on h5. Mamedyarov continued by trying to push queenside pawns, as we noted earlier. c4 is going to be a little bit difficult to achieve, especially with this pawn still on the board. Pragg went ahead and attacked h5, and then in this position calculated very well, calculated this quick sequence. Rook takes h5, bishop g6, rook takes c5, and after this series of exchanges, it might have been that Mamedyarov saw this as well, and I think maybe evaluated this as good for Black. While White is up a pawn after these exchanges, Black maybe thought that he would have sufficient compensation in this b2 pawn, which is already very far advanced up the board and which is already sufficiently defended. And at some point, Black wants to play moves like f6, bishop f7, and bishop a2 in order to break this blockade here. But Pragg must have also seen this and decided that actually this plan is a little bit too slow. White can get too much counterplay against a5, for example. It's very easy for White to put pressure over here. And so we'll see how this endgame sort of played out. e4, covering up this weakness here, so Black obviously couldn't take, couldn't break through on this light square. Rook b3, Black needs to prepare to defend against rook c2. And he needs to do this now, otherwise if he plays just some sort of nothing move like this, rook c2 wins immediately. f5, so continuing to harass this bishop, bishop h7. Now Black has to spend several tempi getting this bishop onto this diagonal. Before, maybe Black, if Praggnanandhaa had not included the move f5, Black can immediately play f6, bishop f7. Now Black has to spend an extra move moving this king away. King e3, so now Black doesn't even have ideas of sacrificing the exchange, perhaps, to break through on the d-file, now that this pawn is protected twice. King f8, as I said, clearing space for this bishop g8 move, rook c5 getting counterplay against a5 already, and we'll see, right, so now Black was able to get the bishop onto this diagonal, but White already had a lot of pressure on b2 at this point. Obviously, this rook is still retaining pressure. This king is awfully close, actually, to the c2 square, where it can assist in attacking b2. This rook is already in pretty good position. It can at some point go to b4, and then after an exchange, this king will be able to slide in and probably chop this b2 pawn. And it turned out that's exactly what happened in this game. So rook db8, king d2, right? And then we saw exactly this exchange happened, and then king c3. So at this point, this plan actually ended up being too late by one tempo. This pawn is actually already lost. And in this position, either Mamedyarov had had enough of this game or had blundered and played king d6. And then, of course, after king 6 b4, Mamedyarov resigned. So this ended up being a very good game by Praggnanandhaa. Obviously, as mentioned earlier, Mamedyarov did end up winning this match, but this game I felt showcased some of Prag's skill, showcased some of the reason that he had been chosen to play in some high-level events earlier this year, and showcased some of what we can hope for as his talents continue to progress. Okay, and so the second game that we'll go ahead and look at is the game between Mark Paragua and Tani Adewumi. This was played at the New York City GMIM Fall event. This was a Taimanov Sicilian, and this became very, very sharp very quickly. Opposite side castling, white captured on c6. So the b file was opened up for black's pieces. White's pawns, meanwhile, were going to storm up the king side. Right, and so this was a game where both sides were attacking each other at the same time, both sides were winning at the same time, both sides were losing at the same time. It's a very wild game. And one of the nice things about this game, even though it wasn't very clean from either side, is that this sort of shows a more realistic depiction of what chess is like, because chess, as portrayed through like Bobby Fischer's best games and Karpov's best games and Magnus's best games, often looks like the kind of game where like one game or one side just like completely crushes for the entire game. But that's not realistic, and that's not what happens in this game. So both sides were attacking at the same time. Tani played this move f5 to sort of stop the advance of kingside pawns here, but it turns out this is already actually a big error. This weakens too many dark squares, and after e takes, c takes, here apparently the winning idea, it would appear that you need to somehow break open this file, but the engine actually wants to play a move like h6. The idea is that after g6, bishop d4, you're going to relocate your queen onto this square at some point, and then you're going to checkmate over here, which is a very strange idea for a human, because this is not sort of like what the position was initially about. Obviously, so Paragua didn't find this idea. Instead, he played queen e2, possibly threatening dark squares at some point, but also threatening, of course, queen takes e6 check. And in this position, Tani found the completely ridiculous rook takes b2. The idea behind this move is that after king takes b2, queen takes a3, sorry, not queen takes a3, bishop takes a3, black has a checkmating attack, in fact. There are too many squares that are weak around black's king. This rook is probably going to get involved at some point. This knight's probably going to get involved at some point. It's very, very easy for white to get checkmated here. These pieces are all too far away from the king in order to defend. Obviously, Paragua did not go down this line. Instead, queen takes e6 check, and attempted to continue his own attack. And so we started to see, you're going to start to see the evaluation bar swing wildly. This is how difficult it is to sort of conduct attacks in these types of positions. Tani played bishop takes a3 in order to bring another piece into the attack and threaten all kinds of discoveries. However, apparently best in this position is rook b6. The idea is to retreat, gain tempo against this queen, defend your own king side a little bit, and also threaten this move with check. Instead, after king d2, Paragua's king is surprisingly safe enough in this position, safe enough that he can actually afford to play at some point g6 and attempt to break through on the king side, maybe. Play continued. This bishop became great. right? So this bishop is going to be good for the rest of the game. Queen c4, Paragua offered a queen trade, and actually in this position, the engine wants to play knight b6 and accept the queen trade. The idea is that after this sequence of moves, for example, black is simply up a little bit of material and is going to have a better endgame. But this isn't really, I don't know if it's because Tani evaluated this, thought he should have had more out of his attack on this king, or if it's because this is not Tani's style of play. Tani actually retreated and played queen d6. And the problem was that now white's own attack with this g6, h6 idea is actually quite strong, and it's possible that Tani underestimated the strength of this attack a little bit. g6, threatening to open up one of either the g file or the h file. Tani opted to open up the h file. And right now in this position, maybe at some point you can double rooks like this. Maybe at some point you can instead play this queen here. It looked like it was going to be very difficult actually at this point for black to defend this position. But there were still inaccuracies on both sides. Right, so black played queen g6, attempting to cover up some squares on the h file. White, instead of playing a move like queen h4, putting a lot of pressure on h8, decided to bring another piece into attack by playing rook g8. But this is a bit inaccurate because white's not really going to get an attack on the g7 square. White's main plan of attack should actually be against the h8 square. So this is sort of a misidentification of which weakness to attack. Again, demonstrating why these positions are so difficult to play. Play continued. Tani did not find the best defense once again. Once again, white was winning, though it was again going to be difficult to break through on the g7 square. Black already had enough defenders here. And then white continued with the attack, Tani sacrificed the exchange in an attempt to generate some sort of counterplay. This check, kind of nice idea, but this rook is still pinned. Right, and attempted to generate counterplay. Once again, Paragua offered an exchange of queens. The idea is that if you exchange queens now, white is going to be up a rook for 3 pawns, and this endgame, Paragua must have evaluated was better for him. Tani did not go into this endgame once again, and in this position, actually, Paragua played the wrong discovered check, unfortunately. He should have gone ahead and played instead bishop h6. The point is that it's important that the king not be able to run away on f8. It's too difficult for white's pieces to continue to attack if the king is on f8. Right, so bishop h6 would have covered that escape route. Instead, with bishop f6, black was now able to play king f8. And fortunately for Tani, there's actually no way for white to continue this attack. There's no checks in this position. And so with that, the initiative passed back to the black side. And this time Tani was able to convert accurately. So queen h2 check, obviously this simple tactic. Queen takes g1, and in this position, white resigned. And so Tani went on to, with this win, secure his 3rd IM norm. Unfortunately for him, none of these norms was achieved at a Swiss tournament, so Tani will still need a 4th norm to earn his IM title, as well as a 2400 rating minimum. So we'll see what next year has in store for this chess prodigy. All right, that's your chess coverage for today. We'll be back with more news and analysis tomorrow. Until then, this is Sean from the E5 Outpost. See you later, chess world.